Darren Hickman, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. Excited to have you here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
So you shared your paper napkin today, which was nearly all decisions are driven by emotions. How you
Mm.
can leverage that in business. Why did you share that with me?
It's something that I've been dealing with recently, actually, in my own business. And it's also something that I have to constantly remind myself because of something I learned in a previous phase of my career. I started out working in the agriculture business, but then I moved into advertising and marketing. And in advertising and marketing, what they teach you to do as the most effective way to communicate with people is to actually do a laddering exercise. And a laddering exercise is actually looking at what you're trying to sell. It could be an idea, it could be a product, and you're supposed to first define the product features or the service features. Uh, but then what you do is you go to the benefits, of course, right? So someone doesn't buy a product or a service because of what it does outside of their person situation. They actually do uh, purchase because of what it can do for them, right? So what is the benefit to them? A lot of companies stop there, right? And we have all seen product benefit marketing. But what has happened recently and over time is businesses have become much more aware of the fact that it isn't the product that people are buying, it's actually what it contributes to their life. And this actually, again, getting to my topic, isn't just about buying a product, it's actually about interacting with everyone in your life. People in your personal life, if you're in school, it's your teachers, etc. And it's all about actually creating some empathy with that person, with that audience, and figuring out what they really want out of the situation. And again, getting back to a product situation, what that really ends up looking like is emotional benefits. And a lot of us have been exposed to and read about the importance of storytelling, right, as a marketing tool. But storytelling also relates to people's personal lives. If you want someone to understand you and what you want, often it involves telling a story. And again, that touches on the emotions and the emotional benefits. Getting to my current situation with my current business, and that is Card on Guard. It's a new technology for pools and hot tubs. It uses sunlight to control bacteria. There's a lot of science behind it. It can get very technical. Even though I have that marketing background where I basically on a day-to-day basis was looking for, again, the emotional benefit. What is it really that the consumer wants? Um, I found myself focusing so much on the technical details, trying to explain it, trying to actually convince people that this technology does work. Um, I stopped thinking about the emotional benefit. When I realized that I was missing the boat, uh, I did start to think about, okay, what is it that people really want, right? Regardless of what I am selling as a product feature and a benefit, what do they really want out of it? And that's when I really started to gain traction with my business.
Yeah, it's really interesting that we do this. First of all, um, agriculture to advertising doesn't sound like a natural leap. I'm sure there's a great story there. But before we go there, it's easy when we're innovating,
Mm,
we're really focused on the product, aren't we? I mean, product, price, place, promotion. That's the four P's of
that's it.
marketing that everybody's drilled into, along with that ladder. One of the things we talk about is product, product, product. If you don't have a product, you have a nothing. So people focus on the product so much, and the technical differentiation. I mean, we get really proud as innovators, entrepreneurs about what we've built. And
Mm,
and so we like to talk about it, don't we? I mean, and it's
yeah.
interesting that you fell into that. how did you, was it an obvious moment where you went, oh, geez, I've fallen into the trap, or did you get hit in the head? Because I tend to get hit in the head.
Yeah, well, I got hit in the head gradually, actually, when I started to notice that people's eyes were glazing over and that people were actually stopping me in the middle of my 15-minute, diatribe and actually going back to the first minute of what I was talking about. I started to see that I was just kind of losing people, and then they would just kind of walk away, whether that was physically or I would just stop hearing from them over the phone or over the internet. And after a while, I realized that I'm not grabbing them early enough and having them get excited enough to stick around to hear the last 14 minutes of what I want to say.
Right.
Yeah.
So for people listening, Car on Guard is a sort of a natural solution combining solar energy with some technology to help keep your pool and hot tub clean.
Yeah.
And look, I've had pools my whole life, and one of the things we learned, pool 101, is the sun kills chlorine. So everybody who has a pool
Mhm.
knows that the sun kills chlorine, and you're telling them that the sun is going to help you make chlorine, which everybody is going to be like, well, what are you talking about? That's not possible. That doesn't happen. Right. So, which is for people listening, that's the natural lean away from the emotional side to put down the doubting Thomases and say, no, 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 it's real, it's real. This is how it works, right? Am I wrong? Am I missing something here?
No, 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 you're right. And actually, coming out with a product that says you can reduce the amount of chlorine you're needing and using is actually challenging a long-held belief that chlorine is the easiest, the cheapest, the most effective, right? And the most widely accepted. And though all of those things are true, which means that I have to strike a fine balance between talking about the product details, the technicalities, uh, like you said, I have to convince people that this product does work, given that people are thinking the opposite, right? But then I have to use enough of the emotional appeal to get them excited and to stick with me. And actually, to tell you a little bit about how the product works, is you're right, the sun kills chlorine, yeah. But if you use less chlorine and you're using something else that kills the bacteria, the chlorine remains as what's called free chlorine, right?
Mhm.
And it just sits in there. That's how I can say to people, reduce your chlorine, even though the sun does kill some of it off. But the sun only kills a fraction of it off. So if you're using less chlorine, then the sun will kill off less chlorine, right? So again, it gets confusing. It's a fine tightrope between explaining the product details, the technicalities, and again, going after that emotional appeal, right? So
Yeah.
it's a
And
little
the
bit
other
of
part
both.
of it is you're also fighting traditional channels of distribution in your world in this
Yeah.
particular industry too, right? Because
Yes.
and so how does emotion play into that? Because you know, the pool companies want you coming back all the time to buy more chlorine and more chemicals and
Exactly.
do the testing, and like this
Exactly.
is where they make their money, right?
Exactly. Um, my first product was based on this need to have an emotional appeal. Um, This is the latest product I came out with. It's a tube, and it looks like something you would use in your pool, but there's nothing sexy about it. There's nothing emotional about this, right?
Mhm.
I came out with this recently. What I started with, because I really understood that you needed something emotional, is I came out with something cool. This is like the iPhone of pool products,
Mhm.
right? We've won design awards, etc.
The shark fin on the top is so people looking at this, it's like this oversized iPad with clearly some membrane in the middle,
Yeah,
and at the top there's a shark fin, and because
exactly.
it's lobsided in its weight, clearly the shark fin would stick up above the water, right? I mean, so
Exactly.
people who are listening,
Hmm.
you can just imagine this blue shark fin uh, uh, skimming the bottom of your pool, the top of your pool. So
Yeah,
very
so
cool.
this is kind of how it is. So again, with my marketing background, I knew that I had to come up with something, again, because I'm challenging the chlorine market. I knew I had to come up with something, again, like the iPhone. It's sexy, aesthetically appealing. Ultimately, that's all emotional, right? So I
Right.
knew I had to do that. But the ironic thing is that I ended up in the beginning going after the professional market. I tried to sell into wholesalers, retailers, and they look at this and they say, okay, that's really cool. But they immediately go back to, but I want to keep my chlorine sales. So I really wasn't succeeding. Then I realized, you know what, I'm going to sell it direct to consumer. The consumer appreciates it. The consumer doesn't care that chlorine sales are going down. Um, so that's why I created a whole marketing campaign. And again, that is emotionally driven, focused on the fin, and Card on Guard actually is playing off of this fin, right? And my tagline is on guard against bacteria naturally. And I have some videos that show it moving through the water like a shark, because I needed to grab attention. I needed to get people excited about it. Wow, that looks really cool. And what's interesting is even though I've come out with this tube, which again seems very practical, it's much closer to the appearance of a real pool product. Now that I'm going after consumers, overwhelmingly, they're going for the fin. And why is that? Because it's cool, it's emotional, and they want to have it in their pool.
Right. So um, early on, when you, so I can just imagine because I've been there, talking to somebody about the features and benefits and technical specifications and how this is going to make your life 5% better, and
Mhm.
people just not really being interested in that.
Mhm.
How did you realign? Like, what's the process look like for you? I mean, and you come from a marketing and advertising background, so maybe it was a little bit more natural, but what was the process that you did to get away from your baby, your creation, um, to put your mind in the lens of the customer?
I had to focus on what is the final advantage for the consumer in using this. So I basically had to flip the script. So in the
Mhm.
beginning, I felt like I needed to explain and convince, and because this is a very unique product, and it's a product that is hard for people to actually wrap their head around and believe. It's unplugged, no electricity, no equipment. You just drop it in and it works using sunlight. And people are like, well, how's that possible? Right. So when I started to speak in those terms, I would immediately run into obstacles. So I basically had to, at one point, say, I'm going to stop talking about the product, what it does, how it does it, more specifically, and focus on reduces your need for chlorine by minimum 50% using only natural light. And then they're like, oh, well, wow, okay, so tell me more, right? And then I focus on what is valuable to them. Drop-in ease of use, works for 12 months, doesn't emit any chemicals. Again, it's flipping it. It's flipping it and starting with looking at it from their point of view. What are the emotional benefits of those things? Well, it's easy, just like chlorine. It's cheap, just like chlorine. It saves you money and it works for 12 months, much longer than chlorine. So it's going to save you time, right? So again, at some point, I just flipped it on its head and started speaking about it from their point of view. What would I want to hear if I was seeing this product for the first time?
And
And
you
then,
didn't land on that right
yeah,
away, right? Like you probably iterated a whole lot. And it sounds like you went customer direct, but it sounds like you were face to face to a lot of customers. How did you manage that?
yeah, well, again, part of my career goes back to the skincare industry. And I was selling organic skincare products to spas and hotels and resorts. So I had a lot of contacts in that kind of spa, which is heavily based on, water, right?
Mhm.
Hot tubs and pools, resorts. So I contacted them and I had them try it out and I had them give me feedback. and I had them ask questions so that I understood what people thought was really important.
So you leaned into your existing network from skincare,
Yeah.
um, in the spa world to get, real customer feedback. And I really think that this is really important. A lot of tech companies, a lot of innovative companies don't find collaborative clients. And
Mhm.
collaborative clients are ones that are willing to try it out and really give you meaningful feedback. It's
Yeah.
it's super important, isn't it?
It's very important because there is no product development life cycle that's completely smooth. Right.
Hmm.
And so you need people to give you honest feedback, and you need people that won't be offended when something goes wrong. So, for example, when I was developing this tube version, I had 4 or 5 iterations of it and a lot of failures. Not that the base technology was failing, but uh, the substrate or something about it, the glue, something about it was failing, and that was incredibly valuable to get to a final product.
So you said something interesting, and I have a story in my own head about this, but you talked about it and you gave an example of people who won't get offended when things go wrong,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
and this is a really critical thing in product development. And I think Simon Sinek talks about it in Start with Why, right? When you start with why, you get the early adopters who are willing to collaborate with you to make your product better, right? They're
Yes.
not going to abandon you at your first
Mhm.
failure. This is a really important thing that I think a lot of us get wrong because we're not starting with the people that we align with. We're pitching first and just going along with the pitchy people, the people who
Mm.
fall for the pitch, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you did it the other way. You did it with people who you deeply align with, who were going to
Mhm.
forgive you for your misgivings early on and give you meaningful feedback.
Mhm.
What did you do to incent them to take a chance on Card on Guard?
Well, well, first of all, the promise of what it can do is incredibly valuable for people, right? So from the get-go, many of them were like, "Yeah, I mean, if it does what you say it does, I'll give it a shot," right? The second reason is that a lot of people just want to help, right? And I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs forget, and that is just to ask because people do want to help. And that's the basis for a lot of research, right? A lot of research that even goes to random people. They know that there's a portion of the audience out there that will fill out a survey just because they're asked and they want to help and they want to feel valuable and valued.
Just because they're asked. That's really interesting because you're not saying that there's an incentive beyond just the
No.
ask and their willingness to come forward. And I think
Mhm.
that we sort of try this tomfoolery, this trickery where I'm gonna, oh, fill out our survey and we'll give you an iPad. You're not getting real feedback then. You're not getting people who want to help you when you
Right.
do that. You're getting people who want to help them, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you focused on people who want to help you
Uh-huh.
and then and aligned around what the potential benefit could be if you got this right,
Hmm.
which would be great for them.
Yeah.
And then they really were there to help you, right?
Yes. Yeah. And as a second phase, I went on Facebook to my friends and I said, again, when I was testing a prototype of the tube, I said, "Hey, I'm testing this new prototype. Uh, Anyone want to give it a try? I'll send you a free product." The only thing they got out of it was something free to try. But what I was asking them actually to do was to kind of risk their existing pool and hot tub care routine. So there was a lot at stake for them, but it wasn't because they get a free thing, because this could have screwed up their pool and hot tub, right? They wanted to help. They were like, "Yeah, cool. That's great. Let me
And
help."
like just for people listening, again, if you haven't had a pool or hot tub, when you've got a system that works on your pool and hot tub, you like to maintain it because that
Mm,
season is not as long as you think it is. People think, oh, people in California have a longer pool cycle than people north. It's not that much longer. People are not in the pool 12 months of the year in most
yeah.
places in North America. Certainly not where I am in Canada. But
Mhm.
regardless of that, pool cycles are short. The maintenance regime that people follow, you get pretty committed to it because it works and you get to use the pool. And if you
Yeah,
don't get to use the pool, it can be weeks before you restore the balance, right? So this is not
right.
low stakes poker here.
Well, and in a bit of an odd way, this touches on the issue of getting emotional versus technical, because what my product promises is that you don't have to change anything that you're currently doing with your pool. You just use less chlorine, because what most people don't realize is almost all systems out there require chlorine as a residual. It's called a residual, like a backup, right?
Right.
Now, a lot of them promise that you can reduce the amount of chlorine dramatically, but you need it as a backup. And so, what I was telling people, and again, this gets to the emotional pitch, which is built into this product from the beginning. I knew that if I had to tell people, switch out what you're doing and use this, I would gain very little traction. So I had to come up with something that said, I'm going to work with your existing system. You're still going to get a good free chlorine reading, et cetera. So anyway.
No, I think it's really important, and it shouldn't be overlooked. So number one, you went out for people who just wanted to help. Number two, you went out to your Facebook friends and said, "Hey, who wants to give this a shot?"
Mhm.
And then was there a third step? What came after that?
At every stage of a business, at some point, you got to roll the dice, right?
Mhm.
You just cannot keep testing and testing and testing, and especially when it comes to water. It's so difficult. It's so complicated to manage water. The dog could jump in the pool, of heavy rainfall, whatever that can mess up the chemistry. So at some point,
The
you
neighbor's
just have
kid comes
to.
over and pees in the pool. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Big weekend party and the beer is flowing and the
Yeah.
sweat is rolling and all that stuff. So at some point, you just have to, and I know this is said in many different places, at some point, you just have to roll the dice, get it in the marketplace, collect that feedback, right? Which is very risky, right? Because you're out there and it's public. So, but you got to do it, right?
Yeah.
So that's
So
that's really my third phase.
so your third phase
Get
is
it
roll
out
the
there.
dice, and I'm assuming step four is iterate, iterate,
Yep.
iterate, iterate. And there's
Yep.
probably an iteration cycle in between each one of those stages too, right?
There's always some tweaking, yes.
Yeah. So um, a lot of people that invent a product, create a product like you do,
Mhm.
uh, have a hard time getting off the podium about how brilliant the product was, which is really
Yeah.
like, look how smart I am for creating this,
Right,
right?
right.
Uh,
Yeah.
it, I'm not getting that vibe from you. Why?
Well, after so many years of developing and testing, things going wrong, it's incredibly humbling, right? So I think that, the people that are on the podium and selling, selling, selling are hiding some things, right? And
Mm.
they're trying to cover up what it really means to launch a business and a product. And what it really means is you've got some failures. You've got, long periods of time when nothing is really happening. And but again, if you believe in your product and you stick with it, you can get to a point where you are confident but humble at the same time. And again, I get back to this product technicalities, benefits, features, and the emotional pitch. You got to stay in touch with the emotional pitch, because that's what the market and your audience is thinking and feeling. And if you're focused too much on your podium speech about your product, then you're going to have blinders on. And you got to keep reminding yourself, why do people really want this thing? And is this really delivering what they want?
Mm. There's a difference between failures and fake negatives, right? And fake
Mm.
negatives, I so my the experience that I laughed about when thinking about people who would be offended when things don't go wrong is I sold a renewable fuel product for many years and became very big at doing it. We were one of the first ones selling it to fleets and stuff like that. And I can
Uh-huh.
remember early on that someone used our renewable fuel, which was biodiesel mixed in with a little bit of diesel fuel, and they said to me that we have a really big problem. You need to come down to the yard right away. So we had to travel. I got there, got out, and they alleged that the renewable fuel was causing flat tires in the vehicles. And
Wow.
because they had a higher incidence of flat tires since they
Mm.
switched.
Mm.
And, you know, the fleet manager was convinced that this was the case. Obviously, it wasn't. And, you know, somebody eventually pointed out that they changed the adhesive that they were using at about the same time, and it was likely the adhesive and not anything to do with the fuel. But that's a
Yeah.
fake negative, right? And
Yeah.
the thankfully the buyer, the fleet manager, was not going to fall for the false negative, but they had to convince their maintenance supervisor that it had nothing to do with the fuel.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between a failure and a fake negative, and you really need product champions. You really need champions to help you through those things, don't you?
Yeah, you do. And speaking of fake negatives, the water industry is full, no pun intended, full of it. And again, because it is so
You could
complicated,
say it's a wash with fake negatives.
it's a wash with fake negatives. Yeah. So I am always prepared and on my toes to respond again, humbly, right? Because I don't know exactly what is going on with their pool or hot tub, but I know that there's 100 different possibilities, and I have to be sure that I am responding, but also understanding that it's very possible it's not my product that's not working. It's something else that they are doing. And again, there's alkalinity, there's pH, there's calcium hardness, there's all this stuff that could be wrong. And I have to navigate that. Yeah. Like I would guess a lot of companies need
Yeah.
to. Yeah.
But the critical point that I'm making is that when you're dealing with an established industry, you really have to get humble about the approach there because you can't just say you can't come in pointing a finger, but you have to
No.
go in very curious to
Yes.
distinguish between the failure, which could exist, and the
Yeah.
fake negative, which
Yeah.
is not likely.
No, and again, that touches on this emotional pitch. Uh, if a company gets defensive all of the time and starts pointing the finger, that's the opposite of empathizing with the audience,
Mm.
right? It's the opposite of taking a humble approach. And I think everyone has experienced both of those cases, with any kind of a service or a product, whether it's going into a restaurant and they complain about, how well done the meat is, and the server says, well, that's what you asked for, right? I mean, that is the opposite of an emotional approach, right? So, again, I think the effectiveness in business is based on having empathy and being clear on the emotional need of the audience.
Can you fake caring about your client?
You can to an extent, but it will reveal itself very quickly, right?
Yeah, so it's better just to care about your client, right?
Yeah, it's better, it's easier, and it's more stress-free. Yeah.
That's great. Um, Darren, we've been ending every episode this season with a shout out to former Paper Napkin Wisdom guest. He was on the show 11 years ago. He since that time he wrote a bestseller book and really created a movement in North America and around the world
Mm,
around
mm,
his book called Giftology. His napkin to us 11 years ago from John Rulin was what you appreciate appreciates. His sentiment was when you appreciate things in the world, they appreciate and value not just to you, but to everyone. So,
Yeah.
with that, he suddenly passed away several months ago.
Mm.
And to honor his legacy and his contribution to the Paper Napkin Wisdom community, we're asking every guest this year to end the episode with a shout out of appreciation to someone around them. So, who would you like to shout out today?
It's very nice, very nice. I would like to shout out to my parents. My parents were artists, and then they moved into the marketing world and set up a business. And I would like to express appreciation to them because they instilled in me a work ethic, but what they also gave me was an appreciation of creativity. Um, and that's what I do every day now. You know, I combine this creative um, gift that they've given me with strategic business sense, and it's been invaluable. It's been invaluable.
Yeah, I can see you. I can see the depth of that emotion in your
Mm,
face right now.
yeah.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate being on.